Well, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. Just kind of update on fishing in general, kind of start this way most of the time. I don't know if everybody paid attention to what happened on the tournament scene this weekend, but this was the first billfish tournament of the year. It was actually held out in Mississippi, but we basically all fished the same waters. The Dustin boats cleaned house as normal. Just drew a blank. Jason Hallmark, one of our local captains, they were 4 for 4 on blue marlins and 1 for 2 on bluefin tunas. We only get 3,500 pounds of bluefin tunas in the Gulf. They exceeded that this weekend. So that was our 1 weekend of bluefin tuna. There was an 800 pounder caught that was not in the tournament, and then there was like 4 over 600. So really, anybody who's interested in offshore fishing, the blue water push is all the way to the edges now. I know everybody's going to get wanderlust and want to run to the fads. You may drive right by 90% of the fish you run that far right now. So that's real good. Surf fishing for pompanos is good. The king mackerel have showed up in force now. So pretty much anything that you want to catch right now is pretty much available now. The wahoos, dolphins, tunas, doesn't really matter. They're all here. So fishing's real good right now.
It's exciting. It's here.
It's here?
Yeah, it's fishing season.
So tonight we're going to talk, mostly about bottom fishing. We have a unique bottom fishery here that we have something going on bottom fishing almost year round. Everybody gets caught up on red snappers and gag groupers. Well, we have mingos and triggers and amberjacks and snowy groupers and yellow edge groupers and scamp, and there's something to fish for pretty much all year bottom fishing if you really want to. So that's what makes it a pretty good unique fishery for us. What do you want to add here, sir, before we go much further?
I'm just thinking about fishing season starts now. Really, if you think about it, summer's here, it's warmer. Everybody always looks at the water temperature to say hey, fishing season's here, and I think it really starts off with Kobe and king mackerel. But for me on my boat, I am kind of responsible for making sure people have fun every day and people catch fish. And the bottom fishing here is always here. We can go out any time of the year and catch and release big fish, and sometimes we have a difference in how we do it. And I'm looking over at the rods that Tim has here, and there's bigger tackle and lighter tackle, but small rods and big fish, especially I think now a lot of those bigger fish are in a lot closer.
Yep.
So you don't have to go very far to catch some pretty big fish if you know what you're doing.
Well, how many marine patrol officers we got here? So we went and dumped fads the other day, and we checked one of the very well-known local, county-built,
not far out,
snapper spots that's 4 miles from the pass. First drop.
On a jig.
On a spoon. Mark's got one about 8 pounds. We just dropped there to check. But 4 miles from the pass, those little new Okaloosa reefs, 8 pound snappers just.
I have a picture on my phone of what the chart looked like, and it was this whole thing.
So we're you need to go scout around a little bit and have some ideas. Those local inshore places, they'll hold fish the first 2 weeks, but they'll get beat down pretty fast, and you won't be able, But in the first 2 weeks, if you got to go 6 miles to catch your fish, you drove right by too many that you could have caught. You should be able to go out on the opening day of snapper season. You need to be able to leave at 8 o'clock and be home at 9. And if you got 6 people, got a limit for those. I don't know how familiar everybody is what you're looking for, but this is a little rock out there that's holding snappers up above it and jacks up top. This is kind of what you're looking for. And this place here, I should have put the picture in here. This is a spot, when you're going place to place, you need to be having that bottom machine running. Because I build a lot of my own spots. We can fish all the public stuff, but I put out a lot of chicken coops and stuff. I ran this one over. It was a place that I had never seen before. I'm running from one of my places to the other, but I was going a little bit different direction, and I ran this over and come back to it. I think I found it 3 years ago on the last day of federal snapper season. You can see it's in 421 feet of water. And I just ran it over. We come back to it. I said, guys, just bait up. Let's go 5 Mississippis. We're fishing way up here. We caught our limit, and I have a picture on my phone I can show y'all. I don't know whoever put that there, if they lost the number, if it fell off the barge when they were making it, they built the spot and they died. I don't know what happened. But there's no way that anybody fished it that year because it was on the last day of snapper season. We caught 10 snappers. I didn't have fish under 20 pounds. And I didn't fish, 100 feet below the boat.
If you guys are here, you probably have a boat and you probably go fishing a lot. I am normally driving the boat, and regardless of what Tim says, I know how to drive a boat. It helps a lot when he's with us because, no matter what terrible story I'm telling or what I'm doing, Tim's staring at the chart. And then all of a sudden he'll just start, and you still don't know how my charts work, which is kind of funny, but all of a sudden Tim's typing away at the screen. He's like, let's go back and look at that. And we're good at fishing, but I also think we're lucky sometimes in where we go. And even last time we went out, how many spots did we mark just running right over them?
Yep.
If you guys are out fishing together and you're staring at the chart and you're driving, if you see anything, and most of the time we find just big schools of bait, but even then, big schools of bait turn into bigger fish.
Yep.
And you're not going to know what it is unless you drop it. Because sometimes this gets, the longer you look at it, you start to know what you're looking at. But sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know what this thing is here. But there's only one way to find out.
Well, you go to that. You go to the next picture, and everybody looks at that and goes, yeah, it's just a cluttery looking screen. That's all Mingo snappers. You can see a few of these are actually, a couple of these streaks are actual lines going down. I actually took that one day when I was running the American Spirit for my buddy.
I'm glad you have the coordinates turned off on these pictures. You'd be surprised how often I do that and notice that I take a picture of it and see my coordinates are in the corner. Yeah, those aren't being posted anywhere.
Triggerfish, you'll normally find, snappers are more that little huddle and then more above them and then more above them. Triggerfish, you tend to get more of these stands of fish. This is what triggerfish will look like on your screen. And you notice these are not on so many people are so focused on going out there and fishing structure. Notice that these fish are just on a drop. This is just natural bottom. We fish a lot of natural bottom. Not necessarily, we're not wreck fishing, but maybe half the time. There again, snappers here, all up through the water column, basically all on rock. Mm-hmm. Mostly snappers, some jacks in that picture. That's a little chicken coop on the bottom.
Now, go back to, now I know we're going to cover a lot of stuff, but if you were in here, you're probably, let's say you're in 150 feet of water. Mm-hmm. Where would you drop your bait? Would you want to throw it all the way down to the bottom?
So I never send it to the bottom first. Down here are going to be lots, you can see how much darker these get up here at the surface. If you drop all the way to the bottom and you catch a snapper this big, you're going to bring all those snappers up into the water column, and now the little fish are more aggressive, so now you're going to catch this size. I only want to drop to these fish right here. At this spot right here, this is definitely not more than 3 or 4 Mississippis. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, stop. I can always let it go deeper. If I'm not getting a bite, okay, let's go a little deeper, a little deeper. As soon as I can get a bite, I want to catch the fish that are in this column right here. Don't go too deep to start with. Well, it's called bottom fishing, but it really should be called suspended fishing.
That's a huge point. That's something that it took me a while to figure out. I think the bigger fish will come up and get that bait. It's what it seems like to me, and I think we do it all the time. We'll tell people like, hey, let it down halfway. If you don't feel anything, you probably lost your bait already, but let it down a little bit farther. And I just want to drive that home. Like the bigger fish are at the top of the school.
You know, in this picture here, they're again all natural bottom. And when you're grouper fishing, you know, when you first pull up, you may not have this part showing. All you have is this little bit down here in the rock. And you need to be, especially when we're grouper fishing and the deeper the water, we need to have part of the screen where you notice on this one, this is zoomed into the bottom 75 feet out of 100 foot and expanded over here. It's the same image, but we can just see it better. But you pull up, and we found a ridge the other day. We're going to go back and fish several times because this thing looks really, really fishy. But it's just all this little fuzz that's down here in the rocks. And when you got this shading, this red shading, and depending on your on your bottom machine, this may show up as yellow fuzz down here or green fuzz. That's live bottom. Live bottom are where your nice groupers live. And the longer you sit here, the more these groupers will start to come out because they're sitting back in these little caves and crevices and stuff. And as you start to drop baits down there, that's when they start to come out. But you need to be, you know, with the shark situation, you're only going to get 3 or 4 bites off a spot, and it's going to be time to move because the sharks are ravenous. Everybody's bitching already. Mm-hmm. Are we that boring, Bill?
No, I was just up late.
Okay. I thought maybe we were boring you to death. That's deep drop. We can come back to that. You know, there's one thing, you know, a lot of times we'll sit here and tell you stuff you need to come to the store and buy. There's going to be a lot of times I'm going to tell you to buy something that I don't even sell. And I know that different GPSs, each one has their own little thing. Anybody who has a Garmin GPS, if you haven't invested in the Garmin
Don't tell them this. No.
The Garmin Blue Charts G3 Vision upgrade. It's a $379 upgrade.
And with a $175 update from yesterday.
But if you buy it now, you don't have if you bought it a year ago, you got to pay the $179. But if you buy it now, it will 2.5.3 whatever is still $349 or $379. It has bottom imagery. The ridge that we found the other day was on a piece of bottom that we haven't been to before. 12 miles from the pass, and it looks fishy, fishy, fishy.
I mean, we'll just sit out on our boat floating around when we're finished with the spot. We'll get on the charts and just start looking around, and we'll be like, oh, what's this? Or worse, I'll be sitting on the couch the night before playing on Active Captain, the Garmin app on my phone, and I can show it to you here if I have to.
He spends hours upon hours zooming in, and he's like, that's a new spot, that's a new spot.
It's ridiculous.
You'll find more sitting on your couch with Active Captain.
You'll find my spots if you sit on the couch and looking at it. Thanks, Tim. Also, Strike Lines, or Seymour, came out with one in the last couple days.
And I think the Seymour is what goes with Simrad.
And it has, my buddy has it. We've compared charts. Most of that data is now available on Seymour.
Yeah. So I think Seymour is what works if you have Simrad, and the Blue Charts is what works with Garmin. But it's like I say, it's a $349 to $379 an upgrade to your unit. It is worth every single penny.
Absolutely.
I have some. See if I can find this. Entertain everybody while I find this.
I don't want to tell them the story about our King Day the other day, because you'll chime in and make it seem worse. Tim and I went fishing a couple days ago, and it was just the two of us, and I had a 3,000 size Stratic, and Tim had like a 10,000 size spinning reel. No, I'm kidding. And he hooked the king, and I hooked the king at the same time, and neither of us could get to the gaff, and it was just about 5 minutes of chaos out there. Uh-oh.
Okay. So, here we are looking at a regular chart. And this is stuff that I already had these numbers. But then I come up and learn about blue charts. And I think my microphone might have just died. Maybe we're back. Oh, there we go. So I already had these spots. These are about 76 miles down to the southeast. But I had these numbers. Well, you can see why they're good numbers. The ridge that they sit on. Well, I don't have anything on that ridge that I could go fish.
But if you went and fished that, I'm sure you'd catch fish.
But I can go sit and fish right here and all along this little ridge. Let's go back some. Oh. So I have no numbers on these ridges right here. Well, I can sit there on my couch and just plot.
Go back over here. What is that? Yeah, I'm going to go fish right there. Either one of these.
No, those are salt domes. You don't want to go fish there. That is truly a salt dome. But that ridge right there, let's get back up in here on some other stuff. So I had that number, and they both sit on a ridge. You can sit here and do this on your phone and just mark place after place after place. And not everyone's going to be productive. And when you go to one of these ridges, like, oh, here's some stuff, I got numbers. You know, you're going to have to fish. You're going to drive along this ridge, just driving along. Well, I'm not very good at doing that with my thumb, am I? And just looking at that little ridge, because all along it, there's going to be little shows of fish. And you'll catch stuff out there, you know. This is all the grouper bottom that's 35 miles southeast.
Look at that.
I have all these numbers here,
Look at that.
but I don't have anything marked on that one, or that one, or that one. You know, so
We literally do this. We'll just sit there and I'll have a cocktail sitting on the couch, and I'll just be looking at my phone. And you'll probably think I'm talking to another woman or something, but I'm like, no, trust me, I'm just looking at fishing spots.
You and Mark are,
Naming them,
yeah, exactly.
trying to come up with a name for my new spot. Even one of the spots we went to, I found it sitting on the couch. We went over there. I mean, great show on the screen. The only thing I could catch were squirrelfish that were borderline that size where you're like, I wonder if I should try to eat this thing. Yeah.
I was going to say, I would trade them for red snappers
But
any day.
it was like sometime in October, November last year, but each one was like this big. And I kept throwing them in the live well, and I was with a buddy of mine. I'm like, I wonder what I should do. And we went over to a known good grouper spot, and every one of those fish we upgraded to a big gag. So,
You know, the next item, that we don't sell at my store, that if you have a smaller boat, if you have an under 30-foot boat, even if you have one with all this new Helm Master and all this stuff that holds up for you, you don't have a trolling motor, you're missing the boat. That thing will, you know, when you're using twin engines and you got these like set point and things, it's great. It will definitely hold you on a spot. But if you want to fly line and catch king mackerels and tunas and dolphin while you're bottom fishing, this thing throws a trail of bubbles for like 500 yards, and you're just not going to catch those topwater species like you will with a trolling motor. Also, I learned this the hard way the very first time I used my other buddy's boat. And using it, you have your live well on and you have aerator. If you're using set point, when you pull up to the spot, you have to turn the live well off, turn the aerator on. Because all the pickups are right there under the back of the boat. And then things are sitting there running and chugging away to hold you on the spot, and it sucks up all that CO2 into the water, and it will kill your live bait like that. So, to me, the trolling motor is a much better option.
The only thing I will say about the trolling motor, I normally, when we get there and we're looking around for where we actually want to park, I mean, you have to keep in mind, like I'll try to get a little bit up current of it because I typically fish with 6 or 8 ounce weights, and you're, depending on the current, like you're going to be slightly, like they're going to drift a little bit.
Yeah.
But one thing that I do all the time, I normally wear my Minn Kota remote around my neck. I can't tell you, I mean, you already know what I'm talking about. I can't tell you how many times, like I'll go to lean over the gunnel and gaff a snapper, grouper, amberjack, whatever, and next thing I know, I look, nobody's getting bites. I can't figure out what's going on. When I lean over, I hit that spot lock button on there, and next thing I know, we're half a mile off the spot. So normally, like I'll lock it, throw it up on the dash as far away from me as I can get, and we did that with the Kings the other day.
Yep. But, Mark, you recognize that boat? Yeah. It was a pretty boat. See, look.
I don't see any fish on that boat.
Tackle. There's all sorts of tackle, that we can use for these, things that, will work from shallow water. Used to everybody fished with a pin 4/0 and a pin 6/0, and they were super, super heavy. Today's technology has come a long, long way. This is all my personal tackle that I brought tonight. But this is one of the Shimano Talica 16s. This is light enough that we can sit inshore and catch mingos and triggerfish on it. This is plenty heavy enough. This is, if I want to go out there and fish in 400 feet of water and catch jacks and groupers and whatever, I use the same rod for everything. And we're going to talk about rigging in a little bit, and the way I rig, it makes it very easy to use the same rod and reel all day long because my rigging is simple and easy to change out. But this is just my typical go-to rig. It's a Shimano Therese rod with a Talica 16 2-speed. And I like the 2-speed because, when we're fishing for snappers, I don't need it. But when we go grouper and jack fishing, you get that fish on. Well, we got to make that fish get up because sharks, like I say, sharks are terrible. You can just to switch it from high gear to low gear, and I normally bring a lead that we can do a little demo with. If y'all want to come by the shop and see the 2-speed demo, we'll be glad to do that with you. But it has a little button on the side of it. When it's in its normal range, it's like 6.8 to 1. You push in the little button, and now it's in 4 to 1. You can move a giant fish off the bottom with a little bitty rig real easy. So this is kind of my go-to rig. And when I was leaving the house tonight, my normal little trout and redfish rig that I have, I think must be sitting in my office at the store because I have a little Shimano 4000 spinning reel, but I brought my other little trout and redfish rig. You wouldn't be, well, this is
what I bottom fish with. I use about in snapper season, I'm using like a 6,000 size spinning rod or spinning reel. Grouper and amberjack, I'll bump up to an 8. But for the most part, it's the rod. So I use a Therese rod for the bigger fish, but the smaller the rod, you can still catch the fish. You just kind of need to know what you're doing. And I think the easiest way of wording it sometimes is like when a fish, like if you're I'll back up. The sensitivity in the rod, you can feel everything. And sometimes, like when I'm driving and I'm watching people fish, I'll just stare at the rod tip because it'll be moving. I'm like, are you guys feeling anything? They're like, yeah, I feel all these little bites. I'm like, when you feel it, just start cranking because there's probably something on it. And it's hard sometimes to turn them, but I'm getting all excited about it now. It's more of, especially on jigging, it's more of like sometimes the technique, and the easiest thing to do is come fishing with me and I'll just show you what I'm talking about. But on it, it's like, when you get snagged on the bottom and you kind of have to pull that rod towards you and break off? Like when you feel that bite, I kind of have people pull a little bit and lean back. And I'm wording this pretty bad, but it's more of you can just feel so much. And I think it's easier catching fish on, especially this rod. I have this rod here too on the boat. It's a lot easier to catch 10 or 15 snapper in a day on something light as opposed to something where you're not only battling the rod or the fish, but you have to fight the rod too. Like I know a lot of guys fish with big, heavy conventional tackle, and you catch an amberjack on that's a good rod,
Yeah.
but on like a big old school rod, I mean, you're wiped out afterwards, like a big amberjack's going to wear you out. But sometimes on these, like let the technology do a lot of the work for you and pull that rod or pull that fish up towards the boat and gain back what you can. But it's pretty wild when you feel some of these and you're like, this can't catch anything. But I mean, we've caught 600-pound bull sharks on little rods like this. I mean, they're more than capable of handling it.
And I'm telling you, in the beginning of snapper season, everything's really easy. But at the end of snapper season, when it starts to get a little bit tough, I'll tell you what, a lot of days, I'll have just my little trout and redfish rigs. I'll put it on a 1-ounce egg sinker. Normally I fish with like a 7-aught owner Mutu light hook. I'll go down to like a 3 or 4-aught owner Mutu light hook and a live shrimp and about a 6-foot fluorocarbon leader and just take it and just pitch it. Don't worry about dropping it, just pitch it. Put it in gear, you can sit it in the rod holder. By the time that it falls and gets this way, you either don't have a bait or you've already got a red snapper on. I do it a lot late in the season because, the fish get finicky. Early in the season, they're really easy to catch. Later in the season, they get a lot more finicky. And something really, really light will allow you to go catch those fish even late in the season.
I've been that way the last couple weeks with triggerfish. Normally, you can drop it. I feel like the rest of the year, you can drop a 2-hook rig with whatever pound test you want on it, and you'll catch triggers. But for some reason, this year, all my triggers are 13 inches. The only way I could find, and I know they're there. We've caught, and I know people call them banjos, but we were calling them manhole covers because these triggerfish were ridiculous. I know they're there. The only way I could get the bigger ones to bite was with like a 5-pound or a 5-foot, 30-pound fluorocarbon leader, and not a 2-hook rig. So, and I mean, I don't know what it is this year, but the bigger triggers, I feel like I had to trick this year.
And another thing, in the rodeo this year, the newest this particular rod here is set up for what's called slow pitch jigging. And we've always fished with Shimano butterfly jigs before, and these are flat fall and flat side jigs and stuff. This is a really neat technique. So first and second place scamp, first and second place Mingo, and I think the first place Almaco.
Almaco came off a jig.
All came off slow pitch jigging. Normally when we go out there and we're jigging in the summertime, the typical thing is reel jig, reel jig, reel jig, reel jig. Boy, it just wears you out when it's hot. Well, the method to this madness is it's a super, super lightweight rod, so you do have to learn how to fight fish different, but the jig goes all the way to the bottom or wherever you need to be in the water column, And with this method, we're going to take the rod and go,
And this thing just flutters.
and it's this kind of slow pickup and snap it right at the very end and then drop it real quick. And it just flutters back down. And you're kind of fishing in this one little section of water column. If you don't get a bite, we bring it up a little bit more, do the same thing again. But this slow pitch jigging technique, this has worked really, really well. And it's just a nice alternative to be able to fish with something that's lighter. The big key to this rod, to this really light rod, is learning the fighting technique. Because most of the time, most rods are built that we're going to lift the fish and reel down, and lift the fish and reel down. When you come and pick up this rod, we'll pass it around too. You cannot lift the fish with this rod. This is you actually pull backwards and reel down, and pull this way and reel down. It's this method. It's this right here.
I can show you pictures on my phone of guys trying to lift that fish up, and I've had the Trevella S, the Shimano rods, I've had them bend almost back in. We in 3 years, we've broken one. And I actually broke it in my hands, which I'm a little embarrassed about. But I think it was a Goliath. I'm not sure what that was, but I wasn't about to let him get me in the bottom. It's different, but again, I think once you figure out how, I think it's a lot easier to fight more fish. I mean, like I said, you catch an amberjack on a big conventional reel, like it's hard, but you catch a dozen fish on that. Normally everyone's like, oh, I need a beer, I need to sit down and catch my breath, and then somebody else hooks up. That guy pops right back up. He's like, give me my rod back, I'm ready to go again. But these, I feel like a lot of the strikes I get, it seems like it would be more technical or harder to do. I've had fish hit these just sitting on the bottom, like just sitting there, and then all of a sudden my rod starts bending, like it's in a rod holder, I'm tying a knot for somebody. I've had my rod start going. But I'd say 80% of the hits that I get are on the fall.
Yeah, at least 80%.
I think it's the flutter on the way down. And sometimes I'll change out my hooks and put like my teasers, those flashy teasers that I get. I've had days where I've started to drop my jig to let fish, to try to catch fish. I've started it, and somebody hooks up. I'll close my bail on my spinning rod, put it in a rod holder. That thing's probably 15, 20 feet below the boat, just kind of fluttering in the current. Kings. So a lot of times, like I know a lot of guys will throw a stinger rig off the back of the boat, waiting for a king or something to swim by. Sometimes I'll just drop one of these like 10 feet below the boat, and I don't know if it's the flash floating in the current, something about it, but plus, I mean, you don't have to spend too much time catching bait if you're catching them on the jigs. Plus, it's fun to set the hook on. Like, I want to set the hook on the fish. So I like it when you're kind of working it, and then all of a sudden you're like, uh-oh, this feels different. You lay into them real hard. Yes, sir.
So it's more so by the weight of the jig is determined by depth of water. You want to fish kind of the lightest jig you can fish and still be able to fish straight up and down. So, fishing in there in 100 feet of water, you can get by with like a 120 gram jig. And you get out there into that 125 to 150, you're going to need to bump up to about 160 gram jig. And, as you further you move offshore, you will need heavier jigs.
And I think, too, it's a lot of what they're eating. So I think my favorite vertical jig that I use, I don't know if it looks like a cigar minnow or a threadfin or whatever it is in the water, but I've tried using those long, like really heavy needle jigs, and I haven't had as much luck on those.
I haven't either.
But like I think a lot of that are like those old, remember those diamond jigs with the treble hook on the bottom?
Yeah.
I think it's the way they flutter on the way down. And when we were looking at those charts about where the fish are, like you're going to cover the water column. Like if I was a big snapper hanging down and something fluttered by me, like I'm not going to let that go, What do you think about where you hook these?
So that's a really good question, where to hook it. On these jigs, there's a split ring, and then there's a solid ring that the hooks are attached to. Don't attach to that split ring. You need to be attached to the ring that has the hooks on it, because that's where the pulling pressure is. If you're attached to the eye of the lure or the split ring and not the ring that has the hooks on it, now you're pulling against the lure, and the fish can do this with the hook set and get off really easy. You have to be tied to the ring that has the hook. Wherever the hook is, that's where you have to be attached to, or you will pull fish off regular.
It's funny, and that's a really good point, because when I looked at this, I mean, you can see there's an eye on this side and an eye on this side, and I was like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. Like, it's going to flutter on the way down, but how do I fight that fish? That's true. That's a good point. Remember that day last year where we were slow pitch jigging and we didn't catch anything? And all of a sudden you started ripping yours real fast through the water column, and you hooked up and I hooked up at the same time. I lost that fish, whatever it was. I think it was a big amberjack. I think you lost yours too. But
I don't lose anything.
my next drop, I thought for sure I snagged you. Do you remember that?
I do.
I was like, Kayla, I got your line again.
He was so mad at me about it. He was like, "This is you're tangling up."
And she was like, my hook's in my hand. Like, what are you talking about? And I started pulling
Actually,
my
I do
line.
remember
I
this
had
now.
like 200 yards of braid that I was just wrapping around my hand, and somehow my jig was on the end of it. I caught my own jig. So, I was really happy about it. I still have that jig.
You know, if there's one thing, that I can't go fishing without, you see us, we sell these at the shop. And, we're going to have some giveaway stuff tonight. We're going to have a little deal on these too. I brought some extras in case anybody needs one. We normally sell them for $35 at the shop. We're going to do them for $30 tonight in case anybody wants one after the show. This is an item that I will not go. If there's not two of these on the boat, I'm not going. There's got to be one on this side and one on this side. To me, primarily this is a fish dehooker. I don't know if everybody knows how to use a dehooker. It's a very simple process. You need about 2 feet of line between your hand and the fish. Make a wrap, run this down to the hook on the fish. Then, when this hook's around the hook, pick the fish up and pull downward pressure and do this, and your fish will come right off in the boat. Easy way to get your fish off. Because I'm going to tell you, probably most everybody already here knows, but if not, I'm going to tell a little story about this, why this is important. Because you want to get that fish off without handling. One is if you want to release him, and two is to stay away from his fins as much as possible. So you run this down, hook it around the hook, lift the fish, pull, and shake, and it'll come right off. It's also, I use this I've gaffed more 40-pound amberjacks, 20-pound groupers, 20-pound snappers. Just reach over, grab the fish, put him in the boat. It's a gaff hook for me. It's a dehooker. When I want to move fish around the boat, I just stick him and move him, throw him in the cooler. If you want to take a picture, you hook it up underneath his jaw and hold it. If you look at the charter boat pictures, everybody's holding one of these with their fish hanging here. It's perfect for that. At the end of the day, if you're fishing in a center console, a lot of the fish boxes are in the deck, and you have to get down there and try to reach around and try to get your fish out. You can just reach in the deck, pull them all out, throw them up on the dock. I use this tool all day long. As far as fins, if y'all, like I say, probably a lot of y'all may have already seen the story on Facebook. I have one more week of IV antibiotics to go. I know at the end, we're going to get finned. If you do get finned by a fish, doesn't matter what it is, make sure you kind of bleed that area out. When you get home, wash it real good with antibacterial soap. Clean it with some hydrogen peroxide, a couple of tablespoons of bleach and a little cup of water, and soak that appendage in there because we want to get all that out. So last summer, I don't remember exactly when, I remember getting finned really deep in the end of my thumb. And I was like, man, that's going to hurt. And I did everything right. I mean, I bled it, I cleaned it, did everything. And I guess I just never paid that much attention that maybe it was a little tender throughout the year. But about 5 weeks ago now, it kind of got sore for a couple of days, and I got to where I couldn't turn the key to get in my house or the store or my truck or whatever. I couldn't turn the key. It hurt so bad. And the next day, it swole up. And the next day, it turned just blood red. And I'm thinking, and I'm looking at it, and I don't, I'm thinking, okay, I got to have some kind of ingrown fingernail or something. But I know that it's so swole, I want the girl at the walk-in clinic to lance it. It just get the infection out. Well, I go to the walk-in clinic. I said, I don't know if I got an ingrown fingernail. I don't know what the deal is here. And the little girl looks at it and goes, there's nothing external on your thumb. You're going to need to see an orthopedic because that's something happening internal. So luckily, I go to Orthopedic Associates a lot anyway for my knees and shoulders and everything else. Well, I called Dr. Watt that night on his cell phone and talked to him. He says, yeah, just be here tomorrow morning. Be there at 9 o'clock and we'll get you in, take a look at it. So he comes in and he starts looking at my thumb. He says, well, let's get some x-rays. So he goes back there and they get me back, x-ray it, come back out. And, normally when you go in the doctor's office and they come in and open the door and they come in and start talking to you after you've had x-rays or MRIs, things are probably going to be pretty cool. Dr. Watt opens the door and he goes, oh, this is probably not good. So go back there and he's showing me the x-ray. Well, from about where my thumbnail starts, all the way up the side and across the end of my thumb is black on the bone. And he goes, and there's something stuck in your bone. Well, with the amount of infection, he was like, okay, we need to get this done, taken care of now. So he goes, I'm fully booked for tomorrow with surgeries, but we got to get this done, so I'm going to stay late. We're going to schedule you at 3:30. You'll just have to be our last one. And they go in and take my thumbnail off and go in from the top side. And he gets all the infection out. Well, he has to, he finds that part of that fin had broken off in my bone. And over the course of 6 or 7 months, that fin rotted. And that's what caused the infection. Not that it was in the skin. So they had to scrape my bone, hollow out the end of the marrow out of the end of the bone. And then, so that was Sunday I was at the walk-in clinic. Monday I was at the doctor. Tuesday I had surgery. And on Wednesday I'm at the infectious disease doctor for antibiotics to kill off what's in it ever there. Well, luckily when they did this, I didn't have Vibrio or MRSA. It was all staph. So hopefully this round is going to get it. I got one more round of the IV to go, but I took pills for 30 days and then twice a week IV antibiotics. He said, after you have your last one next week, then we're going to go 4 to 6 weeks. If it doesn't come back, you're good. But if it comes back, now you're going to have to do IV antibiotics every day for a month. Have a stent put in and all kind of stuff.
How many people at the clinic were also there at the same time for the same thing?
One of my actual good buddies was actually there for the same thing.
It happens a lot.
So the whole point of this is we need to have a pair of gloves on the boat, and we need to have a dehooking device where we don't have to mess with the fish that much.
Guys get on my boat and they were like, why do you have so many of these everywhere? I'm like, trust me, because I'm on a 21-foot boat, so if I have 4 people on my boat, there's not a whole lot of room. And of course, if everyone's fishing at the same time, everyone's going to hook up and fish at the same time, and I'm going to be really upset because I don't know I want one of those, at least one of those, everywhere I can. And I think I use mine more than anything as an actual gaff.
Yeah.
Like I'll just lean over the side, and I like it too because sometimes if you net a fish and handle it and weird, and I try to be big on conservation, and I know it sounds bad, but if I can get him in the lip with a hook and get him up, take a picture with him, and even use that thing to help release him a little bit, if I can grab onto a good part of his tail or something like that, I think it.
And I make these for our shop. I make them in my garage. There's several people in town that make little dehookers. I've never had one of mine come back. If it comes apart, I want it back because I want to see what
I
happens.
still don't know why you gave me a pink one.
I didn't give you a pink one. I gave Kayla a pink one, and you stole it.
He's still, yeah,
I know exactly what happened.
he's just jealous. Pink is the lucky color.
I made my own just to, yeah.
So rigs, you know, if you've gone on most of the charter boats in town, and you go bottom fishing, they're going to give you a rig that has an egg sinker that comes down to your swivel, and then you're going to have your leader. That's the typical rig. It's called a Carolina rig. I got to thinking years ago, and you know, a Carolina rig is designed that the lead should sit on the bottom, and that now, with the lead sitting on the bottom, that the fish can pull the leader and never feel the lead. Well, if we're flounder fishing, that's great. But if we're snapper, grouper, and amberjack fishing, this lead should never be on the bottom. This should not be laying on the bottom. Because of that, it doesn't matter what kind of lead we use, because we fish the water column. These fish are suspended. What makes it where the fish can pull a little bit is not that the lead's laying on the bottom, that the leader is long enough that he has time to grab the bait and swim a little bit before he feels the lead. So I fish this rig, where you have a main line to a 3-way swivel, and then you see snapper leaders 6 feet long, groupers 12, amberjack 18. You know, 18 is a little much, but when the jacks are finicky in July, or not in July, but August and September, when we get to that fall jack season, sometimes you have to go to an 18-foot leader to get bites. But what I also like about this rig is that the lead, we can use these snap leads. They're much more aerodynamic, so they don't tangle as bad going to the bottom. They fall faster, and they're easy to change. Because with the egg lead rig, the lead is trapped on your line. So every time you want to change the size of the lead, you have to cut it and retie it. Well, I may change size of lead 4 times during the course of a day, because we start off in 60 feet of water, then we're in 120, then we're in 160, and then we're in 320. Well, with this, when I want to change it, and I can't hardly do this with my thumb right now, I have to use my other hand.
Also, I don't care how good you are at running your boat. And when you're moving from spot to spot, I don't care how good you think you are at managing your leaders and your weights and all that stuff, but wrapping an 8-ounce weight around your reel and trying to put the hook somewhere, I take my weight off, I put them all in a rod holder, I throw my weights in a cup holder, and I run full speed to the next spot.
Yep.
You don't want weights swinging around off the back. You know what I'm talking about.
So like Mark says, that weight's not sitting here beating on your rod. It's not tearing up your guides, your rod, your reel, because you can take this on and off. You know, I have people just put it in your pocket. Just take it off, put it in your pocket. It's fine.
One thing that I do a little different, and Tim's probably going to get mad at me about this because these are more expensive. They do sink faster. I like that. These are great if you're, I like these better if I'm being honest, but if you're fishing every single day and you're going through a lot of weights, I use regular bank sinkers or any weight that I can find, to be honest with you, and instead of a snap, I just tie a little loop of 20-pound mono or something like that, just long enough to go through the 3-way swivel and then to stick through the eye on it, wrap it on, just like the bottom of a pompano rig or something like that. And I think, and I'm not trying to hijack your story. A lot of times I'll tell guys like, hey, drop this thing to the bottom or somewhere in the water column. If we're grouper fishing, drop it to the bottom, let it sit on the bottom, maybe a couple cranks off. Guys will let this thing go down and sit right on the bottom. And then you'll see the rod start moving. You're like, there's a fish on, and they're like, oh, I'm snagged. And half the time I'll take that rod from them, and you'll still feel the fish moving. And I can't tell you how many times I've broken off and still had the fish on because the weight was snagged on the bottom right here. and this fish was still swimming around somewhere up here. So I always feel like a genius when we get the fish to the boat and there's no weight on it. I'm like, yeah, my little loop worked.
It's a good. I actually have no problem with that one.
A snap swivel on that?
No, so on the bottom of the three-way swivel, I'll just tie like a double overhand knot on a piece of mono. I got you. Damn, what is this? What is that? 100 pound?
We'll tie one up. We'll tie one up and send it around for you. You know, main thing, and the other thing I want you to learn is, you know, this leader is longer than the pole. So take the hook and hook it through the foot of a guide. Never go through the ring, because that'll chip your rings. We want this piece from the hook to be really straight. So I hook it on a guide pretty close to the top. I bring it down, wrap it around the reel. Now it's ready to go. So by hooking it way up here, eventually there will get to be where there's a little kink right here where it goes around the reel. Well, I want the leader to be as long as it can be before we have that little kink. That's why I hook it up here way high on the rod. But this rod's really good. We can run through some pretty rough weather. Your rigs run really good. That's the rig that I like.
Normally I'll take that. I'll put that through like an eye on the hook, and then just do the same thing on this end. That's 100 pound, but it's a lot easier with smaller line.
So this end is tied to the swivel.
Yeah, just to to right here. Let me can I use a small one?
Yeah.
Or I'll use, this one's already open.
That's just kind of a repeat slide there. That's your typical Carolina rig where the weight would be trapped by the swivel. And the leader, if you're going to use an egg sinker, that's fine. You know, it's the types of sinker and the type of rig does not change the fish you catch. You're going to catch just as many fish using an egg sinker rig as my rig. It's just that it's a more cumbersome rig. The charter boats still most all fish this way. So if you're fishing with an older Carolina rig, it's not like you're doing it wrong. It's just not as convenient of a rig. Oh, and another question that I hear all the time, how much lead do I need? The average, the general rule of thumb is 1 ounce of lead for every 10 feet of water depth. So if we're in 60 feet of water, 6 ounce lead. 100 feet of water, 10 ounce lead. I would always like to have the lightest lead possible, but I want to be able to fish straight up and down. That keeps everybody, if one person's got a heavy lead and the other one doesn't, and the current's running and it does this, and you're constantly going to stay tangled up. Have heavy enough leads that everybody can fish straight up and down. That's the biggest key to the lead size. Probably everybody knows what a 2-hook dropper rig is. This is what we, a long single hook rig. That's what we typically use for, our snappers and our groupers and our amberjacks. For triggerfish and mingos, we typically use just a 2-hook dropper rig, which is real easy to tie. We sell them pre-made at the store. If you don't know how to make a dropper rig, come by the store one day and we'll show you how to tie them. They're real easy. That's the snap leads that we were talking about, the regular egg leads. This is the bank lead that Mark likes to use with this little loop of mono on there, which is fine too.
And I'll use like a 20-pound loop or something like that. And just so that when I do get snagged, it's easy to lose the weight and keep the fish. And for some reason this year, and I don't know how it happens, and if any of you guys can figure this out, I've lost a couple fish, and I've lost the weight and the hook, but I still have the 3-way swivel and the leader. So that same thing. Every time it comes up, I make that same look that you have. I'm like, people are like, what happened? And I'm like, oh, this happens all the time.
Need better fishermen. So hook sizes. I progressively like, for me, the owner's 7/0 Mutu light, this is my go-to snapper hook. It's a fairly light hook, but It's spring wire, black nickel Teflon coated, chemically sharpened. So this will catch any snapper that we have here. For jacks, I'm going to pass all three of these around. This 7/0 Mustad Demon hook, this is kind of my favorite go-to Jap hook. And then this 10/0 Mustad, this is my typical grouper hook. And some people are going to look at this grouper hook and go, man, that's a big hook. Well, in all three cases, I think I use a bigger hook than most people. An 8-pound grouper is a mouth this big around. So this 10/0 hook that I'm going to pass around, it ain't that big.
And I want to let you know how many fish we catch that have like 4 hooks in their mouth. And some of them, you look at the hooks on them and you're like, man, what were they fishing for? And they're this big around, but I'll be damned if that hook didn't set perfect in that fish's mouth.
Yeah. You know, and then, triggerfish hooks. We'll pass this one around. This is just a little Mustad 3/0. That's kind of what I like for my triggerfish. You know, as far as leader size, you know, I typically make my snapper rigs out of 60-pound mono, my amberjack rigs out of 80, and I do grouper rigs out of 100. The best way to store leaders on a boat is take a big fat pool noodle, cut little ridges in it, and just wrap it around a pool noodle. That's how I store them. That's the easiest way to store them. You know, if you come in here and we're talking about tunas, tarpon, inshore fishing, you're going to hear fluorocarbon, fluorocarbon, fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon works on light refraction and water density. Personally, I think at the depths that we're bottom fishing at, you do not need fluorocarbon leader. Regular old Andy leader is fine, and it's a third of the price. Sometimes we're going to sit up here and tell you, you got to buy this fluorocarbon, you got to spend this $20 for a little roll instead of $6.99. Bottom fishing isn't that. I have not found that to be the case, because fluorocarbon works on light refraction. Well, there's so little light. You get down there 60, 70, 80 feet, there's not that much light to deal with. So I never worry with fluorocarbon on my bottom rigs.
And I think there's so much competition too amongst. I mean, you saw some of those pictures of the schools of fish. I mean, I think about growing up eating food with my dad. Like if my mom put roast beef on the table, my dad was going to try to eat it faster than me. So like I grew up eating fast, you know. And if I drop down I hope 10-inch long mingo snapper or something like that, then yeah, I think whatever fish is there is probably going to eat it. So, I didn't say that. But speaking of that, I guess that's a good way to go into what bait we like to use too. I think for me, Tim and I go back and forth about this sometimes, about spending. I think your motto is, don't leave the pass until you have enough bait for the day.
Yep. March of jigging. There's not a right or a wrong. If you like to jig fish, that's fine.
I like to go out with the mindset of, all right, we'll start small, and especially because half the people I take out really don't know too much about what they're doing, so we kind of break up the ride a little bit and go try to catch ruby red lips, squirrelfish, mingos, and see what we can't. Just get them used to using like a lighter rod, because it's a little different, and we may or may not throw all those fish in the live well.
You know, but we're good. You know, so Mark likes to jig, and I like to have enough live bait. You know, if I'm running a trip, you know, I'm going to stop at the bay barges, catch pinfish. Then I'm going to go right out in front of Dustin Marina. We're going to get some threadfin herring. Then we're going to go out by the pass. We're going to get regular herring, cigar minnows. Then we're going to go to the nearshore wrecks. We're going to get some ruby lips and mingos. And we're going to have a live well full of variety. And the jigs are great. I'm one of them ones. I don't like to leave till we have 100 baits.
I say this, but then when we get to our spots, 9 times out of 10, the first thing I grab is a big live bait and drop it down.
And then we're going to talk about another bait here in a minute, and it's one that we'll both agree on, you know. But as far as your live baits, you know, some of y'all been to quite a few seminars, you know. There's these little 99-cent to $1.29 bait rigs. We carry them because Walmart, West Marine, and everybody else carries them. And then there's the Hayabusa Bait Rig. They're $3.99. You're out there by the pass, and you're sitting there with your $1.29 rig, and you're struggling to catch bait. And there's somebody over here with this Hayabusa Bait Rig, and they're stringing them 5 at a time. Why? This one has real fish skin. This one does not. This is fake. That's why it's cheap. This is one of the cases, like I told you, we're going to save you a bunch of money on fluorocarbon that you don't need to spend money on. Buy a quality bait rig. It will save you money, time, and everything else in the long run.
And I'd probably buy a lot more than you think you need because you hook into one fish. I think we've talked about this a couple other times before. Say you have 6 cigar minnows or thread fins on that sabiki rig, when you pull it up to the top, you got it. Have somebody grab when that rod comes up and there's 6 of them on it. Grab that weight and keep those fish hanging this way.
Pick it up, swing the weight to you, grab the lead, sit the rod like this, and let somebody else dehook them.
Because you remember we had one day where a Spanish mackerel came through and hit the sabiki rig, just twisted it all up. First drop, sabiki rig's done. I mean, you could sit there and try to untangle your sabiki rig, but no. So we go through these, and when I first moved down here and I went into the store to buy them, I was talking to a guy about how often we fish, and he said, I was like, do you have any sabiki rigs? And he was like, yeah, how many cases do you want? And I was like, I just want a couple. And now when I look at it, when I go in, I'm like, all right, I'll take a case of them. Because we go, and plus, I mean, how are you going to...
6 a day, every day.
How are you going to store them on the boat? And I know there's PVC tubes and there's pool noodles and ways to store them, but it comes to the point where you're like, look, fishing's supposed to be fun, and there's too much of a, all right, I got hooks swinging around and there's weights banging around. Let's take the weight off the 3-way swivel. We're done with that sabiki rig. There's hooks missing off of it anyway. Just keep it simple.
And then get you a couple of these bigger sabikis. This is like the regular Hayabusa that we use is a size 6 or 8. This is an owner, which is actually number 4, but it's way, way bigger hook. This is perfect for catching your mingos, your ruby lips, everything off the nearshore wrecks.
He does. I mean, we get there, we're dropping 2 hook rigs, we're letting people catch fish. Tim's over there pulling up mingo after mingo off of I think it was actually a small one.
It was. I finally ran out of hooks because they broke it all off. But the bait rig, these bigger bait rigs work great. And, you know, we all use mingo snappers for bait, right? Everybody's used mingos. So there is another really good bait out there that most of y'all don't think about. And just make sure you clean, you know, when you're coming in at the end of the day, you got them 8-inch mingos in your live well, make sure you throw them out. Because we got stopped the other day, and I swear we had not gone from here to that door, and I threw 3 triggerfish out of the live well. Most of y'all thinking, what, triggerfish in the live well? Well, I'm telling you what. You think hardtails are great amberjack baits. Them little triggerfish about that big, it is the stuff. It works.
Tim, where do you like to hook your bait?
So, where do I like to hook it? If it's cigar minnows, herring, threadfin herring, all your normal baits, there's the eye socket. If you go in their eye socket, it's kind of loose. They can come off real easy. There's a little, just ahead of their eye socket and not to their nose, there's a little gap right in there, and I hook my baits right there. They live really good. They don't tangle when they go to the bottom. Sometimes you can tail hook a bait. It will have a little bit more action, but your baits will not live very long. And if you reel him up, you almost kill him every time. But I always hook mine kind of right there in the nose.
What about frozen cigar minnows? Frozen bait?
Frozen cigar, like if I'm using frozen bait, I'm going to go through the bottom of the jaw and out through the top of their nose.
All right, now I have a question for you guys. Where do you hook one of these? Or where do you tie your line to one of these?
So, and then my favorite, you know, there's all sorts of live bait that we can use. And I have, you know, if anybody's unfamiliar with them, if y'all want to come up here afterwards, we can run through some pictures. And, oh, we didn't talk about getting live bait from the live bait boat.
Yeah.
You know, but I have pictures of all the, that's a regular herring. We got a cigar minnow, threadfin herring, hardtails, alewives, ruby lips, squirrelfish, pinfish. Those are all of our typical live baits. You know, so we can go out there in the mornings and catch all of our live baits sabiki rig fishing. If you take the time to catch live baits, they are much better bait than the ones that you buy from the bait boat because they're fresher. The ones that the bait boat catches, they net. But that said, if I'm going fun fishing and there's not a line of boats at the bait boat, I don't have a problem going over there and getting 2 scoops of bait and just go fishing because it's easy, it's quick. You know, it's $60, here you go, let's go. So I do use the bait boat quite a bit for fun fishing. If it's a tournament time, if it's Rocktober in the rodeo, we're going to go catch bait. We're not going to buy bait.
And I think it helps a lot to throw those bait guys a little bit of a tip when you get some stuff from them.
And one of the big things with the bait boat guys, learn how to get bait. This is an easy process. We're going to, you know, don't go bow up. Don't try to, you know, if you got an outboard boat, you know, you'll see the charter boats will back up to them. Don't back up to them with outboards. Pull alongside. You know, as you're pulling up, 1 finger, 2 finger, however many scoops you want. We want 2 scoops. You pull up, they'll hand you the dip net with 2 scoops in it. You put them in the live well, $30 a scoop goes back in the net, hand it back to them. When you go to leave, I see it every time I go there. Somebody gets their bait and they slam it in gear and the bait boat goes. Well, I guarantee you next time you're going to be short on bait. Just the same way as you ease into the bait boat, drive a quarter of a mile away before you hit the throttles. I promise you, you'll get more bait the next time. It's a simple, easy process. You pull up. Like I say, they're going to hand you the net of bait. You dump them in the live well. You put the money in. You hand it back.
And, I mean, don't pull up on this side.
I've seen that too. You got to be on the right side of the boat. Oh, it gets comical out there some days. So, live baits, great. I love them. Jigs, great. I've caught more quality groupers on bonita slabs almost than anything I fish with. Oh, most times it's better than live baits. The only problem with bonita slabs is you get to fish about 4 to 6 baits. And after that, it's time to go to the next rock because the groupers have already bit and the sharks have came now. But it's as good a bait as you will get.
Best part about fishing with bonita is you get to catch the bonita.
No, you get to catch the bonita and freeze them for me.
I don't care how many fish we catch at the end of the day. When I talk to a kid and I'm like, hey, what was your favorite fish? Was it that grouper, that snapper, that amberjack? And he was like, no. What was that one that almost exploded on the reel? And you're like, the bonita? So like I said, like I always say, it's supposed to be fun, and I don't care how many bonita I catch on like a rod, like that blue one over there. It's fun, and it's awesome bait.
But bonita is as good as it gets. If you have little bonitas, you can just cut the fillets off and cut them into strips. If they're bigger bonitas and they're real thick, trim that fillet down. You don't have it more than about 1 inch thick. Sometimes on those big bonitas, it's going to be a 3-inch slab of meat. Cut that down to where it's only about 1 inch thick. And then off a bonita fillet, you know, I don't, 12 inches long, 3 or 4 inches wide, that's as good a grouper bait as there is out there.
And sometimes for us, like if we're stuck in triggers or we're trying to get away from mingos, we'll even take a couple pieces and cube it. And if you hook it through the skin, you'll catch 5 or 6 different fish on it just because that skin's so, and you'll see when you're done fishing at the end of the day and you're trying to get the bonita off your hooks, it's hard to get that skin off. I'm so glad you asked. If I see anything on the surface at all, I'm gonna fish it. I don't care if it's bonita, if it's mahi, and I don't know what it is. I'm gonna throw a little jig. I keep on either rocket, at the end of either rocket launcher on my boat, I keep small 1 ounce jigs that I could throw from here to Lulu's, and I'll rip it as fast as I can. And you'll know when you hook up because that reel. And I use like 3,000 Stratics for my sight
Same
casting.
stuff you'd use for trout fishing.
Same rods and reels that I use in the bay, or at fads, or sometimes trolling for kings if we're using plugs and we catch bonita. Any bonita that I catch, I'm taking home and putting it in the freezer. I'm using it that day for bait.
Yeah.
But if
grass lines.
Put that thing in your cooler, and honestly, we'll eat them too if you do it right. Trust me, there's a way to do it, and I don't think you'll. If I made it for you, I don't think you'd know if it was blackfin tuna or bonita. There's a way. There's a way to do it. But for us, if I see anything, and I'll tell, like if Tim's staring at the chart plotter and Kayla's hanging out doing whatever, I'll tell everybody on the boat, keep your eye open. If you see anything, let me know, because you don't know if it's tuna or if it's bonita or mahi or anything. But grass lines, fads, any structure, your stinger, your flat line off the back of the boat. But mainly for me, if I see anything, and this will turn a 4-hour trip into a 6-hour trip when I see something jumping out of the water and you throw your jig in, and once you catch one, I feel like everything gets excited and you catch a bunch of them. But I'll throw out a jig and I'll show you pictures of what I like to use. I'll reel as fast as I can and I'll lay into that and just let him.
You were talking about bonita being hard to get off the hooks. You know, when you're bottom fishing with squid for triggerfish and mingos, they can get that off so easy.
These will last forever. And your hands won't look like mine from dealing with squid all day.
Yeah. The only bonitas that are hard to catch out there, if you go out there and over the next 2 months, you're going to see schools of bonitas that are randomly busting all over the place. Those are easy to catch. When you see those bonitas that are in a little pod circle and they're all going right side by side by side, I don't care what you throw at those. They're spawning. You are not catching those. They got something totally different in their head. They're not in feeding mode. When they're doing that little doodah, you can just drive on by those. But the fish bites that they're passing around right now, I mean, that is so easy for triggerfish and mingo snappers. Comes in little pre-cut chunks. You just take it out of the package, hook it on. Most of the time, you can get 3 or 4 bites before they're going to get it off.
And it's a lot cleaner to deal with. It's not, I mean, you don't have to worry about keeping frozen squid in your freezer and then cutting it into the right size pieces and dealing with all that. I feel like a lot of times too, we'll catch, or we'll have squid and then we'll change it up and put on one, especially that white squid color, and that'll outfish real bait. But another thing about those bonita, I try to cover a lot in my trips every day. So I try to tell people like, hey, we're gonna catch. I ask them what they want to catch first of all, but for me, in the back of my head, I always have something that like I think is probably the best chance for the day. But 9 times out of 10, when I hit the pass, I'll throw a trolling line out and I'll make a loop or 2 around the sea buoy. Sometimes I'll hook into a king. Sometimes I catch a bonita, which is going to be my bait for the day. Sometimes we'll run by some fads and see if we can't pull up something, but they'll absolutely hit on the troll. But I like to catch them on a jig.
Bonita also makes great trap bait.
Yep.
The lady that lives in my condo, she sees a boat pull up, she's down there, it's like, where's the fish? Give me the bonita.
You know, and when you're talking about jigs and stuff, you know, I've posted more pictures of 800-pound sharks and 500-pound blue marlin and 600-pound tunas on our Facebook page. The most commented and most viewed photo that I've ever had on Facebook is the 2 amberjacks on one jig picture. That one's got 100,000 hits.
You remember that day?
Um,
I'll have to send you a picture.
you know, that's actually another jig that's a really good amberjack and snapper jig.
The biggest triggerfish I ever caught in my life was off of a squid jig like that.
Yeah. And I meant to bring one of these. This is another thing that's so useful. The old days of regular fighting belts that you got to wear all day. These things can store all over the boat.
Plus, there's always that awkward moment for me. Like, I don't know. I know most of the people on my boat, but there's always that awkward moment when somebody hooks into something a lot bigger than they're ready for. And then if you're trying to put a belt on somebody, it's one of those like, don't mind me. I should have bought you dinner before this, but to try to sneak in, and I'm not going to tell you what we call this, but to try to sneak that in and stick it on the end of the rod butt of somebody, we have these now on my leaning post on my boat. There's 5 of them there, so no matter what's happening or what's going on, you can, and they're bright yellow like that too, so you can see them. But I mean, you know, where you wear a hole through your shorts at the end of the day, and you're like, what is this bruise from?
But it's way better than a belt. Gaffs. Oh, This little guy here, he looks a lot like a hardtail, but he's a lot thinner and he's more pointy on each end. If a hardtail fins you with those 2 little fins on the bottom of his hand, it'll poke a hole in your hand and it'll hurt for a minute, but it'll quit in just a second. This little dude fins you. If you catch one of these guys here, just dehook him over the side of the boat. Don't worry about it. If he fins you, your arm will be numb for 30 or 45 minutes.
I walked away from just a picture of it.
They're hateful. Menhaden. Lizardfish, that's another great bottom fishing bait. I think that's pretty much what I got for slides. Questions? Oh, come on now, y'all can't know everything.
I'm trying to think, am I missing anything? Just forget everything Tim said about that Garmin chart. I'll just throw that back out there. It was terrible advice.
So I kind of think we're kind of covered most things for tonight. You know,
What about this?
that was your bait dehooker.
Yeah.
You know, we got little bitty bait dehookers too. We brought one of those.
I think the more you handle bait, the quicker it dies.
Yeah, the less you can handle, the less you can touch it, the longer it will live.
Plus, for me, there's something cool about like somebody's holding that sabiki rig and you can kind of flip it over into the live well, and you're like, I still got it, you know.
Well, anyway, you know, next month will be tarpon fishing, which is a cool, unexplored fishery. There's very few people doing it here. We probably only have 2 or 3 charter boats and 3 or 4 private boats that do it. It's a whole unexplored fishery. It's as exciting as cobia fishing, except there's actually fish to catch, unlike the cobia fishing. Because cobia fishing this year was absolutely, you know, yeah, I don't know how many of y'all read my fishing reports. I always try to tell you like it is. If it's great, it's great. And I tell you that. When it's terrible, I'll tell you that too. I wrote an apology report 2 weeks ago. I looked back over past historical records of weather, temperature, everything told me that this would be a good cobia year. And I put that in the fishing report back in February. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, I corrected myself on that one because, boy, I sure blew that one big time.
But it was a great year for pompano.
It was a fantastic year for pompano fishing. Looks like the bay fishing is going to be good this year. We're going to have plenty of snappers and groupers and jacks. Everything that I've seen jack fishing so far, just in the few days it's been open, the boats have been doing really good on those. They have all had shark problems, but other than that, the jack fishing looks like it's going to be real good this spring. Offshore fishing is shaping up to be really good. We have a huge eddy that's just broke off the loop current and has pushed blue water all the way to the edges. So I think we're going to have a very, very, very good fishing year. If one of y'all could just talk to the weather gods and Please calm it down some.
Everybody who has tried to book a charter with me lately, I've been sending them a message saying like, look, the weather's been bad. We've canceled a lot. So, and everyone's like, I'm going to do a dance. And I keep sending the same image of this Indian rain dance. And every time I send it, we have to cancel that trip. So I don't know if you guys know any rain. It's been tough.
How far off do they have you go from keeper jacks?
I think you can get plenty of them in that 15 to 18 mile range. Jacks like that big steel structures, you know, all the tugboats, the Mohawk, the Chepanik, and all them things. Most all of them will have jacks on them this time of year.
Kale's going.
Okay. Never mind.
All right.
So you want to go? Kayla's.
One thing I want to tell you real quick, we are going to give out, Tim has so graciously given some little discount cards to Hitch, so in case you guys want to go check out any of those things. Also, there's a card on here that is a little bit of information about the Billy Bowlegs poker run. It's not going to be this Saturday, but next Saturday.
It's no fun at all.
Legendary is putting this on. It's for a great cause. It's the Emerald Coast Autism. It's benefiting that. So I'm going to give you a little card about the information on that one. And I think the captain's party is actually going to be next Friday. Check it out. We would love to see you there. And it is. It's a lot of fun.
What?
I don't know a lot about cobia fishing. Excuse me, I've only ever caught one in my life.
I'll tell you what.
I've been seeing a lot of people talking about how bad it is. Where I came from, and that's Cape May, New Jersey, that fishery has turned on in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
Guys that were striper fishing, and
Yep.
that's all they did. They stopped striper fishing and targeted cobia.
Yeah.
And they definitely run in cycles, and we're just in the very depths of a bad cycle. I can remember when it was great in the 80s or 70s. I can remember when it was horrific in the late 80s, and I can remember when it was great in the 90s and good in the 2000s.
So it wouldn't be like something where they're just migrating through earlier or...
No, we're just in a bad cycle.
So from Cape May, I grew up in the Mid-Atlantic, so I know that a lot. And my buddies, where I learned to fish the striper guides on the Chesapeake Bay, they're cobia fishing. And for us, I think last year and our cobia fishing here is fun. It's also very disappointing, but it's a fun type of fishing, just like tarpon fishing. But I think the majority of the cobia that I catch anyway is this way. So I mean, you're fishing on a reef or a wreck or some natural bottom or something. I think that's where a lot of the good cobia come from, is off the bottom. Well, somewhere in the water column.
I had a buddy catch one last year in the back bays of Cape May.
I had a buddy catch one off my boat. It was the calmest person I've ever seen hook a fish before. I just hear it sounded like a Volkswagen fell into the water next to the boat, and I look over. I'm like, what? What was that?
Here, give 'em
And,
one of
and
these
Tim
with the
Tim's
hats.
going, yeah, it's the one I was looking for. Just as calm as he could be.
He asked me if I wanted a net.
I was like, you want the net or the gaff? Like, what are you doing over there? And he was like, you're going to need the gaff. Just real calm. Like, I'm like, you can get the gaff. You gaff it yourself, Tim.
And he almost threw me in the water over a frapping sheephead one day.
It was a good, hey, still the biggest one I've ever caught.
So you got 3 hats to give away.
All right,
Get-
what-
with a spoon.
What kind of trivia do we have?
How big a lead do you need?
How big a lead do you need for
What size lead per 10 feet of water?
what size?
1 ounce.
Well, you already have a hat, so you can't get. What else?
What's your favorite grouper bait?
My favorite grouper bait? We haven't covered that.
Oh, I thought we did.
And we'll have to turn the camera off if I tell you that truthfully.
We're back to that other fish that's a little small.
Which day is the poker run for Legendary?
Thank you.
What day is that?
Good one.
It is the 15th.
Who said that?
I heard 15 back there.
You still eating pizza? And what's Tim's last name? All right.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate y'all coming out tonight. And we'll see you the first Tuesday of next month for tarpon fishing.